Hi guys and welcome back to my channel. My name is Madeline and this is Made with Books. First of all, Happy New Year to everybody. And yeah, I kind of fell off the Vlogmas bandwagon at the end of it. I had one more video in which I boldly claimed that I was gonna succeed for the rest of the days of Vlogmas, and then I didn't put up another video for the end of Vlogmas, so sorry about that. I have a good excuse. I finished making Daniel's Christmas present, which is why I couldn't. But yeah, so that's what happened. But new year, new start. And I thought I would start by doing Pauline from Dancing Lawns reading retrospective tag. I wasn't tagged this time around, I did it last year as well, but I still want to do this tag. I think it's a really good one, and Pauline said that anybody who wants to do it can do it. She just didn't want to put pressure on anybody by tagging them specifically, so I'm gonna do it. The first question is, which book would you recommend to anyone and why? And for that, and I'm not sure if Pauline had the same answer for this one or if she chose it for a different one, but no, she had it for a different one, but I chose Maybe You Should Talk to Someone. A Therapist, Her Therapist and Our Lives Revealed by Laurie Gottlieb. I read this for the BookTube prize judging, and Laurie Gottlieb is a therapist herself, and in this book she talks about being a therapist but also going into therapy herself, which as a therapist she has to do on a regular basis, but in this book she's doing it for a specific situation in her life that causes her to want to reevaluate things and go to therapy. And throughout you have different people that are in therapy with her that are not per se real people, because she can't just write about her actual patients, but they are an amalgamation of different patients and sort of represent those patients that she has, and they are all true experiences but combined in a way to anonymize them. I just think this book does a really good job at explaining what therapy can be like, the good that it can do, and just I think there's still a stigma around therapy, and I think the book helps to take that away. So and I think everybody should read it, either because it can help the person that's reading it themselves, or it can help them to understand other people who are in the situation where they need therapy better. Either way, I would highly recommend this. Question number 2 is, which book you read this year has taught you something new? And for that I chose a German title. I will try to show you the cover if I can. Roughly. The title is Was weiße Menschen nicht über Rassismus hören wollen. It's by Alice Hasters, and if you were to translate it roughly into English, it's What White People Don't Want to Hear About Racism. This is a book that is, I would say, part memoir and part non-fiction about racism, particularly in Germany. And one thing that, well, I did know beforehand, but I think that I've learned more about in this book, and that I want to continue to learn about, is in terms of German colonial history, particularly the treatment of the Herero by Germany. Now, Germany's first genocide in the 20th century wasn't actually the Holocaust. It was before that, and it was between 1904 and 1908 when the Herero and the Nama, two people that lived in what is today Namibia and were under the colonial regime of Germany, they rose up and they tried to fight against that, and it was just a brutal cut down of that attempt, and tens of thousands of Herero and Nama were murdered. And to this day there has not been any financial compensation by the German government, and I think only last year was the discussion that Germany would publicly officially apologize for it and acknowledge it, like they're starting to acknowledge it even as a genocide only now. And I think they agreed on the apology, but Germany still refuses to do direct financial compensations. I think they want to do finance projects in the area and so on, which is all good and well, but is not enough. So that was one thing in this book particular that I learned a bit more about. Now the next question is, which book you read this year came just at the right time when you needed it? Again, I'm gonna say maybe you should talk to someone, by Laurie Gottlieb. Just because, well, I don't really mention this on my channel, but I do go to therapy. I'm not going to go into the details of how and why, because I just don't want to. But just in terms of that, this book also helped me personally. Question number 4 is, which book you read this year will stay with you for a long time? And for me, I think this is The Nickel Boys by Colson Whitehead. Again, I read this for the BookTube Prize judging, and I have a whole review on the book, which I will link down below and I guess up in the cards if I can figure out how to do it. And yeah, just really quick, this is a story of Elwood Curtis, who by mistake gets sentenced for a crime he hasn't committed and is sent to a correctional school, which, well, school is a generous application of the word in this instance, and just the horrible treatment that he and the other children that are there receive, and the racial segregation as well. Elwood is black, and the way that his dream and his beliefs in Martin Luther King Jr.'s philosophy, how they can hold up against the situation that he is in. And yeah, it's heartbreaking, and worst of all, it is based on historical real events. But it's a really good read. I would still highly recommend it. Question number 5 is, which book you read this year expanded your reading horizons, new genre, authors, theme, style, format, etc. And I chose 2 books that I would say were content-wise a bit weird, maybe is probably the best way to put it. One of them is Bunny by Mona Award. And again, I have a full review on this that I will link below. And this is the story of a woman who gets a scholarship for a writing program at a university, and she has these classmates who are very cliquish and close together, and at one point she gets invited to join them, and things get really weird really quickly from there. The other book that fits this question I listened to an audiobook, and that was Earthlings by Sayaka Murata, which in the English was translated by Jenny Tapley Takamori, but I actually read the German translation, which is called Das Seidenraupenzimmer, and it was translated by Ursula Grefe. And it tells the story of Natsuki, and we get her story from when she's a young child, I think 10 or 11 at the beginning, until she is a woman. And as a child, she used to go into the mountains with her parents to visit her grandparents and meet her favorite cousin there. And these 2 kids, they sort of had their own fantasy ideas. The cousin thinking he wasn't really from the planet Earth, he was an alien. And Natsuki thinking that she had magical powers, that she's a magic girl. The book really, though, deals with the trauma and the horrible things that happen to Natsuki throughout the story, and just trigger warnings galore for this book, definitely, in terms of sexual abuse and just all kinds of things that you wouldn't think would happen in that story. But it's very weird, and I still keep thinking about it. So I would, if you don't mind triggering subjects and like really dark things, then I would recommend this. But it gets very weird. Question number 6 is, which bookish things did you particularly enjoy doing, purchasing, or using this year? In terms of doing, I mean, there weren't as many literary events, of course, in 2020, but some that I still did enjoy is for the Frankfurt Book Fair, which obviously didn't happen, it was virtual only, but we usually have a spot at the book fair for indie publishers from the state that I live in. And as a sort of replacement for the actual presentation on the book fair, we produced videos with lots of those publishers. and I was only behind the camera, and I wasn't the one filming. We had like a professional filmmaker do that, but I was the one asking the questions, and I together with a colleague, I came up with the questions. And I think those videos turned out really nicely. I will link an example down below if you're interested, but they're all in German, so only if you speak German. Otherwise, and yeah, I just really enjoyed being part of that project from work. And then also from work, where I said there was only a virtual book fair, that's not quite true, because there were still events taking place in Frankfurt at the time, but you know, with social distancing and wearing masks and everything. And we had one reading in Frankfurt in the city that I organized, and it had lots of different authors from the state of Hessen or that are connected to the state, some that had stipends with us in the past. I was really looking forward to it, and then I got a cold, and so I couldn't go, obviously, because I didn't know what kind of cold it was. So I stayed home, but luckily we decided to live stream so I could still watch it. And I think the event turned out really lovely, and I was very happy with that. It's no longer online though, so sadly I can't share that one with you. And then we went to this art shop and picked up 2 bookish art things. One was this tree, which is just, if you can tell, it's just like made from these little strips from a book, and I think it's just very cute. And the other one was this umbrella, which I also really like. It's just decorations, they're not really stuff to do with, you can like play with, I suppose, unless you're, well, I don't know. But I still enjoy looking at them. And then question number 7 is, who are some booktubers, subscribers or other bookish friends that you got to know better this year through watching, comments, personal contact, online or in real life or otherwise? I didn't get to meet any booktubers in 2020 in real life because of the pandemic, sadly. There's certainly booktubers I would love to meet in real life, but right now that's just not possible. Some of the booktubers or commenters I got to know better over the year. Continuing to get to know her better, I would say, is Pauline from Dancing Lawn, who created this tag, and then also continuing to get to know them more. Alan from Big Heart Books and Classics, who I'm currently doing a read-along with of Paradise Lost, but not only with him, but also with Rosamund from Skellydandling About the Books, who I got to know better through that read-along, and Stephanie, who is not a booktuber. And then in terms of commenters, Time and Chance, who frequently comments on my videos and who I also interact with on Goodreads. And then I have also done a lot of reads together with Karen from One Writes Reads, Tiffany from Hierarchy of Reads, and Mark, who no longer has a booktube channel. And then there was also a read-along of A Little Life hosted by Leo from A Little Book Life that I more or less participated in, but I got to know him better through that, as well as Freddie from Sluggish Reader and Jyotsna from Jyotsna's Bookscapades. All of the channels, of course, will be linked down below. So I would say those are some of the people that through buddy reads or group reads I've gotten to know a bit better over the year. Question number 8. What booktube videos did you particularly enjoy this year? One that I really very much enjoyed, and if you haven't watched it, I would highly recommend, is A Victober Tea Party, Books, Buns and a Bit of History by Rosamund from Skellydandling About the Books. And she talks about the history of tea in connection with British history, and she ties it together extremely well, and it's just like she's telling you a story, but you learn so much while watching the video. And then she's also dressed up for it because it's Victober, and she has like a proper little tea party with herself and you as the viewer, and it's just absolutely delightful. I highly recommend that one. And then another thing that I really liked and that I started to do, but I haven't followed through with the videos, I have to go back to it actually, is, even though I didn't complete it on time anyway, but the 1000 Doors readathon, there was one by Emma from Drinking by My Shelf, Tasman from Tea Books and Tasman, and Meg from Meg with Books. And the idea of the readathon was that they, all three of them at the start of the readathon, put up different prompts, and you could decide which prompt you would choose, and then you would go back once you finished the book for that prompt, and they would ask you a question about the book, for example, how many stars you rated it, or if you were able to predict the ending of the book or not. And depending on that, you go through a different door and land at a different video that you could only find if you're going through that door. And so through that, you would go do the readathon. There were lots of other booktubers involved as well in making those extra videos, but these three were the main hosts. And I think it's just a brilliant idea of a readathon. So I really enjoyed their concept. And then another video format that I really enjoyed are the Saturday Hodgepodges, the plural of Saturday Hodgepodge, by Brian from Bookish. And he does these every Saturday, and he just sums up the week, and he usually has a different topic that he picked up throughout the week in connection to BookTube, a different discussion that he talks about, and some of the books that he read, and sometimes he does a tag, has a tag thrown in there, and it's just it's always a nice thing to watch. I haven't watched his most recent ones of this year and the last one of last year yet, but I will link down below to some examples, and of course all the videos and channels mentioned again. Question number 9, and the last question, is: did you discover an all-time new favorite book? And I would say there's 2 potential contenders that could, in the long term, if I look back on them, become favorite books. One is definitely The Nickel Boys by Colson Whitehead. I really loved this. I definitely want to read more by Colson Whitehead in the future. And the other one is A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. This was the group read that Leo from A Little Book Life, his channel name is based on this, as you can tell, organized. And I still think the book has certain flaws. It's about this group of friends of 4 people, but one, Jude, is really at the center of it, and he has just had this horrible past, like trigger warnings, all of them. The thing is, though, that Hanya Yanagihara very slowly throughout the novel unpacks his past. You don't get it all at once. And the more happens, the more it just, the way that life has beat him down, but you understand why he is the way he is now at the present time in the story. In a way, at the end, it was almost, for me, a bit overkill, like she beat you with a stick with it. And of course, people have horrible lives, and they can have all these horrible things happening to them. But for me, it was almost a bit too much. But at the same time, there was one thing in the book that happens that just absolutely broke my heart. And at one point I thought it was gonna happen, and then I put this off and was like, nah, that's not gonna happen. I think something else is gonna happen instead. And then I remember when I read it, because I was close to the end of one part of the book, and Danny was like, hey, you want to play a game? I'm like, yeah, sure. I just have like 1 or 2 pages and then we can play the game. I will have finished this part. And so I read those pages and Daniel came back, and I was just bawling my eyes out. I can't remember ever having cried that much with a book. And it wasn't just like crying, oh, this is a sad scene. It was like, I was genuinely heartbroken at what had just happened. I felt the loss. Like it was somebody in my life, and I was just, even just talking about it now, I'm starting to notice that I could well up. And I think I cried for like 10 or 15 minutes, and Daniel was completely like, he couldn't console me, and I was just so heartbroken. I had to really pull myself together again. And for a book to do something like that with you, that is really powerful, and I think that will stay with me, and I will probably reread this at some point if I want to have my heart ripped out again. So yeah, those 2 definite contenders for favorite books, I would say, or favorite books already. Now the final thing to do is to tag some people. I know it's already the beginning of 2021, but I think you can still do the tag, and it's still very much relevant, I hope, seeing as I'm doing it now. And I'm gonna tag Alan from Big Heart Books and Classics. I don't know if you can do it right now. I know he had problems with his phone. I haven't seen him upload in a while. But Alan, if you are watching this and if you have the means to, I would love to see you do the tag. Then I'm gonna tag Leah from A Little Book Life and also Shannon from That's So Po, because I would really like her to see their take on this as well. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you the next time with probably how I did on my 2020 reading goals, and I don't know yet if I'm going to combine it with my 2021 reading goals or if those are going to be separate videos. I will see how long I ramble. Okay, bye guys! Which book you read this year would you recommend? Which book you read this year would you recommend to... Why can't I ask the question? The first question of the tag is, which book would you recommend? Oh my god, I can't say the word.